Good morning. I'm so glad that each of you are here this morning because I know it's a choice. And I know it's an opportunity for those of us deep down that want to serve the Lord and worship Him. And that's where we gather every first day of the week to do that and remember His sacrifice as we just did. And so with that, we are so glad that you are with us to be a part of that. If you are visiting, and we do have some visitors, we're so glad that you have come our way as well. And we're anxious to be able to meet up with you if possible. So after services, if you'd remain just a brief moment so we can at least get to know you just a little bit better. So we made it to the new year. All right. Well, that's the first full week of just non-interruption. I was kind of, and I say that because of the way Christmas and New Year's both landed kind of midweek, mid to latter week, Wednesday, Thursday, kind of put a disruption into our routine. As many of you know, I say I like a routine. I guess we're all habitual. We just like to kind of have a pattern. Holidays are wonderful and they're nice and they come and they go and the families come in and we get to have a good time with it. But now it's kind of settled down and kind of get back into the routine, kind of back into business, so to speak. So with that, and it's not really a New Year's message per se, but as we start a new year, there's probably not a better place to start than with our minds, our thinking. It's a good time and a good place to talk about that start because that's where a lot of us get motivation to do anything, isn't it? It's a new year. We make new goals. There may be new challenges ahead. We already know what the calendar of 2015 may be presenting us. So with that, we start to make determinations about doing something. Maybe stick with it. Maybe it's a plan. Maybe, dare I say, it's a New Year's resolution. We don't like to usually say those words, but if we do, that's the starting point. Okay, here's where I was in 2014. In 2015, I want to do this. I want to be better at this. I want to accomplish this. Well, that's where we start. It's where all motivation starts before we actually put it into action. We make a decision. It's a determination. We all remember that Proverbs 23:7 says, "So a man thinketh, so he is." It's kind of where we start. That's where the root of it all starts. So what we think is important. The New Testament talks about what we should find ourselves thinking on. Think on these things. And there's a list of those things that we can follow. There was an old campaign slogan that also used a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Because we have so much potential. There's so much there. And sadly, have many of us put our minds on hold. Maybe we often go to sleep in some departments of our lives. And many of us maybe are just kind of on an autopilot when we do things and not really giving things much attention or even undivided attention. We talked about that in class today about being diligent. Being diligent to seek after this rest, or heaven as we would call it, to set our minds on it. Another version says to pay every attention to all of those things. I think we brag that we can do so much multitasking and brag that we can do so much that we really don't devote ourselves to one simple task. Now, it's getting kind of out of hand, and I know that you've seen a lot of the commercials and PSAs about texting while driving. And how important it is to make sure that we have our attention on what truly matters. Now, one that happened about a year ago that's now taking precedence, and maybe you've seen it on social media. It was about a year ago that a mother was videotaping with her phone her kids in the back seat singing and playing. And she was going along, and the kids were just having a good old time. Who was driving the car? Well, she was. And then an accident pursued in the middle of that. You see that on the phone. It was the sounds and then the little child in the back. Mommy, what just happened? It was that simple. And we know that that's not really the recommendation that we should do while getting in a car. But why do we have to be told that? Because there is a little bit of us that has the arrogance enough I can handle this. I can do all these things. It's really kind of insulting, and maybe this happened in your family as well, but sometimes during the holidays, older, maybe grandparents may be upset at the younger generation that are constantly looking like this and doing this. And are you listening to me? Oh, yeah, I'm listening. You didn't give the undivided attention. Could have said all kinds of things, but you think that you can handle all of these things. And a lot of times they're just that, distractions. And I think a lot of times we think that we can handle most of what life puts in front of us. Now, what we divide ourselves and that true devotion of undivided attention, that's for another time about how we can get off track. But what we think and how we think is our true starting point to anything that we want to do in life, to accomplish anything. The Bible also points out that from our heart, or what we think, is about what defiles the man in Matthew 15. Out of the heart. That's the starting point. Again, our hearts and thoughts usually go hand in hand. The Bible calls our minds to action, and that's where I want to take us first. So let's take a look at that over. If you want to turn over in 1 Peter 1. 1 Peter 1, starting with verse 13. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance, but like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. Peter says to prepare your minds for what? For more knowledge, more Bible learning. A lot of times we just pack ourselves full of this information. More understanding so I can know the differences. No, it says prepare your minds for action. Something that we're going to do. It's stressed again. Talked about what we did in our past lives out of ignorance. And then in verse 15 it tells us to be called to be holy yourselves in what? In all your behavior. See, that's action. You say, well, you can't judge me. You can't judge my heart. That's what's so good about it. I'm not there to judge your heart. God tells us not to judge a heart, but I can judge your actions. And that's exactly what the Bible tells us. John tells us that as well. You can say one thing and do another. It's not true. The truth is not in you. You don't practice the truth. The Bible calls it for what it is. And in addition to that, what we talked about last week is not only having, but keeping a sober spirit. That was last week's message. Some translations say, for our preparing our minds is gird up the loins of your mind. Now that's, gird up your loins for your mind. That's not really something that we use as our terminology, but they understood. Before we get into what that is, this mind thing must be a pretty important subject when you think about it, no pun intending. All these words throughout the Bible about preparing, to be on guard. The Lord is coming. When he comes, how will he find us? Is he going to find us prepared or unprepared? Why? Because I want you to know this. Heaven is a prepared place for prepared people. That's the bottom line of the parables. A prepared place for prepared people. Even think of heaven that way, where we should, because the virgin's parable, the wedding feast parable, the talents all showed the need for preparedness and for the Lord's mighty return. Because know this too, heaven will not be a place of unexpecting people that were all taken by surprise. Like, wow, a heaven? I never expected this. Where did this come from? I never knew this existed. And wow, this is all for me now? So if preparing is of the utmost, as the New Testament prescribes, and Jesus with the parables, and preparing is the case, and it's a pretty big deal, I think we all need to be better in the preparing business, because there are going to be many that are going to be caught unprepared, and that doesn't get you a pass. It doesn't say, well, because your heart was right and because you really kind of wanted to, all of the virgins would go. Because all of them came. They wanted to go to the wedding feast. They all brought lamps. They all fell asleep. They were all in the same category until the end. And then there was a division with the 5 and 5. Maybe no one has challenged you or I like this. And Peter says here, prepare your minds for what? Thinking, more contemplating, more, Eric, I'll get to it later. That can come next week, next month. More knowledge, taking no action again. No, rather, there is something that we will be doing. This phrase, prepare our minds for action, is comparing it to the ancient practice of gathering up one's robe when needing to move in a hurry. so we don't get tripped up in it. We don't all wear robes, but you understand, if you had a cloak that went down to the ground, you would have to make sure, and if there was an undergarment that went that way, all that talking about, that's where there's the belt, and the analogy when you talk about the salvation, talk about the helmet and the sword and the shield. It's a tunic, and you put that and you tuck it in the belt. Why? So you can flee, you can run, you can attack, you can do all these things and put it in motion so things don't trip us up. But that's talking about our thought processes as well. The meaning is to pull up all those loose ends of our thinking. Maybe it's casual thinking, because our mind is so full of thought. I like what Paul says over in 2 Corinthians 10. It's hard to get away from these passages. We are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That's a life-changing verse. I never thought about that before. How many casual thoughts have you had that come and go and you don't think anything of it? And yet I'm supposed to be encouraged to take every thought that I have and captive. I'm holding on to it. Out of what? Out of the obedience of Christ. Is it some thoughts? Kind of every now and then, kind of God checking up on us. Whoops, caught another one. This will take a little more effort to take every thought in, because it seems that we are so careless with thoughts. And that's why people say open mouth, insert foot. I'm sorry that came out. My thought, and then I ramble it out. I just let it go. I let it fly. We get ourselves in trouble. We may think that on the thought patterns, well, it's not hurting anyone. I can think whatever I want. That's why pornography on the computer is so dominant, because the illusion that it gives is that it's deceptive enough to say that I'm not hurting anyone, and it's only for me, and it's only my business, and no one else knows about it. And it always comes out and always comes out further, and it gets into all these messy details. But see, the starting point was the sugarcoating of it, of the harmlessness of it, that I can think whatever I want to think. So when this verse comes up along about taking every thought, not pass by, let it go, capture it, to what the obedience of Christ. Now, how harmless is my thoughts that are just kept to myself? And now can I justify to have them? Why, Jesus tried to go way beyond what the Jews thought when you put that analogy together. What was sin? On the Sermon on the Mount, he was talking to them and taking them back to their beginning motives. They just looked at action. Action was the sin. The sin is what we say is what committing the crime. See, even in our society, it's not committing a crime if you think, well, I hate that person, I wish he would die. And I can have that thought. The law would not punish you for that thought. Jesus was taking about the forefront of that start and that beginning and that seed right there. See, because our laws say, until I pull out a gun and then I kill somebody and I murder him, then I broke the law. See, the Jews were the same way. That's what they equated as sin. Well, it's not sin to commit it. It's only a sin when you commit adultery, they concluded in their hearts and their minds. Where Jesus said, if you listen to your heart, and where did it start with? That if you've lusted in your heart, you've already committed adultery. And if you hate your brother, you've already committed murder. See, Jesus said that. The Jews said, no. If you pick up the stone and you murder someone, that's when you've murdered him. He said, that's not the intent. That's not where it starts. Where is your mind? Where was the beginning? They did not like to hear that. Not to the Jew. It was only for actions, but Christ was pointing out their motives. And that's what the word for it does for us today, as we read today in our class in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 12. It's sharper than a two-edged sword. It can decipher and go into the intentions of the heart, in your thoughts, in your minds. That's what the word can do. And that's why it's so active. And with this now new Christian focus, we start to reject all the hindrances of the world and focusing on the future grace of God, as this verse and text says. And then adding the words that we used last week, being sober-minded. And he says, keep a sober spirit. Not just have one, but keep it. Which includes the ideas of steadfast, having self-control, the clarity of mind. That was last week's message. When you're not sober-minded, it's all foggy. You can do things that you would never do sober. The sober-minded Christian is in charge of all of his priorities. The question is asked of us, who is really running the ship? Who is the captain of your life? And then with that lifestyle, not to be overtaken with all the various allurements of the world and what it has to offer. And as obedient children, the verse says, do not be conformed to the former lust which was found in yours and my old lifestyle. Ignorance. Now, a lot of times we confuse that word with just being stupid. It's not. Ignorant is just not knowing. I'm ignorant of a lot of things. It just doesn't make me stupid. I'm ignorant to open up the hood of my car and work on it. I kind of know where the oil filter is. I kind of know where things are. I'm just ignorant of the goings-on of the mechanism that makes the engine go. Now, if I studied it, I could find more of that. But see, in your past life, you're ignorant. You didn't know. Paul says, I would not know what covetousness was unless the law came and told me. There is the enlightenment. God told me. He revealed. We didn't know any better. But we know the truth. We know the difference because we've been told the difference. We hear Paul use the same verbiage of not conforming to this world, but what? But be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Again, all of this talk about bringing our minds into subjection. Romans 12:2 is what we quoted. And over in Colossians, Paul tells us to set your mind on things. Where? Above, where God is, not on the things of earth. Colossians 3:2. Just where we live for here and now. Are we continuing to do that? It's hard to do all of that when we are so fleshly. We're carnal. We let ourselves think whatever we want to think, and so often it's to fleshly desires and matters. We live in the world, yes, but that's not all there is. We reside here. Sure, we are preparing for a prepared home, as I mentioned earlier, because we also sing a song, "This is not my home, I'm just passing through." Do you really believe that? Why, some of us may get to the point of groaning to be with him, as Paul states, if we can even really understand that. For many of us that are still fighting for our lives, say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to groan. I don't want to leave. I don't want to. And I'm not saying that you're wanting a death wish, that you want to die. But see, when you really grow into that relationship with Jesus Christ, to the point where you say, you know what? I know this isn't forever, and whenever I go, I just want to be with him forever. And I groan for that. And Paul states that. And when he gets to his point in his relationship with God, I'm vexed. I'm torn between the two, he says. If I die and I go to heaven, I'm with God. That's far better than being here. But if I'm here, it's going to be useful for you because I'm going to be able to produce fruit. Over in Isaiah in the first chapter, there is something the prophet was voicing to the people of his time. If you want to turn there for reference, Isaiah 1, chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from my sight. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, reprove the ruthless, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. See, taking action also takes a little work, a little effort. We first are encouraged here by Isaiah to remove the evil deeds, and then we're asked to stop doing them. Not only remove them, but stop perpetuating it, stop practicing it, quit doing the same things over and over again. Funny how this verse suggests it's easier and more natural to do evil and evil things because he has to tell us to stop and cease to do evil. And also, did we catch this? We have to learn to do good. For many of us think, well, I'm a good person. A lot of that stuff is learned. You learn to do good. It's not a natural thing. Why can I say that? Because I can take two-year-olds or below in this nursery over here and give them one toy, and we're going to see how that's going to work out. What's in their nature? Especially if it's one of it is theirs. And you're saying, now, little Johnny, you need to share. It's not natural for me to share. I have to learn that. You need to share. Mommy says share. What is that word? That's foreign to me. That's mine. See how easy it is? The very start, so easy. We have to learn to do good. We may talk a good talk, but in the doing is the more challenge. It's always been that way. John says the same thing. You say you love God, but you hate your brother. It's a lie. It's a farce. You may talk all the stuff you want to talk, but we've got to see it. And also to be told to defend the orphan, those who struggle helping themselves, and plead for the widow. Again, what we here at University strive to do in our work in the kingdom by looking out for those groups, and why we give to boys' groups homes, and making sure that we take care of the widows. Looking back with verse 10, God was fed up with all of their deeds. You can go back, look further in there. He calls out the rulers of Sodom and the people of Gomorrah. But then when verse 18 comes up, the Lord wants us to reason together. And he displays a wonderful contrast to the above verses of what he has to offer any of us. Because he talked about the disobedience of Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, come now and let us reason together. That's using our mind. What are we going to reason, Lord? Says the Lord, though your sins are as scarlet. See, he's going to put the contrast of where you are, where he is, and where that leaves us. Though your sins are as scarlet, they will be white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they will be like wool. If you consent and obey. Everybody loves that verse 18. He's going to wash my sins as white as snow. And I'm going to have all this afforded to me. And he says, and you will if you consent and obey, you will eat the best of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword. Truly the mouth of the Lord has spoken. What a wonderful display of God's forgiveness and grace to any of this. And justice, all mentioned in the same paragraph. And these will be given to whom? Verse 19 says, another if you consent and obey, doing what the Lord has asked us to do. I don't know where deep down this notion comes from of rebelling, because it's talked about that as rebellion. There again, just like what I said with the 2-year-olds, it starts at such an early age, doesn't it? How sadly some of our first words from our children can be what? The word what? No. They hear it so often. No, don't touch that. No. Okay, now you got to come with me. No. It's time for bed. No. Where did that come from? We tell them no, and they tell us right back, no, I am not. No, I will not. We can be in our 70s and 80s and still be telling God, no, I will not submit. And here to be reminded to learn to do good, learn to be content, learn these things. Then back over in our 1 Peter 1 instance in verse 15 tells us why we should take this conduct. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. See, holiness defines the Christian's new nature and conduct, in contrast with the old man lifestyle where he did what he wanted and thought what he wanted. And then God comes along and tells you not to think that and not to do that. We'll be at a crossroads. Well, I still want to do that. You've got to be careful with what you wish for, because God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do whatever. And we talked about that in the lesson just a couple weeks ago. And the reason that we are told to practice a holy manner of living, that of Christians, is to follow after our name, since we bear that name, if we dare call ourselves Christians, Christ being in there. We're put on with him in baptism, Christ, and now to be more Christ-like. We are united through Christ with a holy God, and therefore, in turn, we must treat him and his word with the utmost respect and reverence. But we don't stop there. We turn around and glorify him and do that best with how we act it out, with our conduct. It's how others, we always see, let others see Christ living in me. How are they going to say that? By how you talk? There's a lot of talking. So we know, that's how I trust all the politicians, right? When they get up and they say what they're going to do for me, I trust them at their word, right? We all say, it's their actions. But you said this, and then I saw your bill, and your bill became law. So what you said didn't mean this. See? Call them hypocrites. We want them voted out because they're not men or women of their word, because of their actions. We are able to be like him and not just appreciate, but emulate. He is our example for a reason, so we can follow it, so we can go out and do the same. It's disciples. It's all set for us to follow. That is the pattern. Therefore, I am ready to prepare my mind for what? For action. Against something that goes against maybe my will. That's what Satan wanted Jesus to give up in the temptation. We talked about that in class 2 today. Just take your rightful place. You don't have to wait on God. And all we saw the pattern was for Jesus is not my will, but yours. Yeah, but he could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free as we sing. Yes, he could have. But he died alone for you and me because he could be obedient with his actions. Jesus couldn't have just talked the talk and then not finished with his walk and not dying on the cross and say, well, you know what, I gave it a good try. He had to do that. Prepare to take action against something that may not fit with my own will. And we can add that it's not your will be done, but our Heavenly Father. And maybe that can help you as we start a new year, preparing our minds to do something about it, not no longer just talk about it. And that's why it's so good to use it in this comparison to New Year's resolutions, because we're so good at talking about it January 1. I'm going to put it in action. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have all this taken care of. And you know, a week later when you don't put it to action, what happens? You put it to bed, put it to rest, and I'll just wait till next year. And that goes for anything. But this is the most important thing. And have you prepared your mind for action as we start this upcoming year? Maybe you need a little help with that, and that's what we offer, an invitation, that we can pray with you and for you and help you with your walk along the way, because everybody's holding each other's hands in this. We're all on the same level. Or maybe you never obeyed the gospel, and we don't want to let an opportunity go unnoticed to say everything is ready and everything is prepared for that moment, if that is your desire. Whatever your wish is, if you'll come now, make it known as we stand and as we sing.